what are you doing?" I screamed in surprise. In front of me stood my husband, Aaron, holding an empty beer glass with a fierce expression. My name is Marilyn, and I'm almost 45 years old. I live together with my husband, Aaron, and our son, Raul. My mother passed away when I was young, and my father, a single man, had raised me. Our family home is a restaurant that has been passed down for 5 generations. Known due to my father's good nature and skill as a chef, the restaurant has grown into a popular establishment with notoriously difficult reservations. Since I can remember, my father has been asking me to take over the restaurant. I wanted to fulfill his request because I love and respect him deeply. However, I had reasons why I couldn't inherit the restaurant. Firstly, I was terrible at cooking. Even when following recipes, the result would turn out completely different. No matter how much I practiced, I couldn't improve. Secondly, and this was a major issue, I couldn't handle customer service. I think people who say serving is easy have excellent communication skills, which I lacked severely. My communication skills were significantly subpar. Whenever I stood in front of others, my mind went blank. Making eye contact and speaking to people was impossible for me. Just taking orders would end up angering the customers. After helping out at the restaurant multiple times, I realized I was causing inconvenience by being there. I realized that I lacked the talent for customer service. With that in mind, I started considering the possibility of being useful behind the scenes. I enrolled in a business school to learn about management. That's where I met my current husband. Aaron was the complete opposite of me, always the center of his friend groups. I guess this is what they mean by having high communication skills. I always watched Aaron from afar with this thought in mind. Being socially awkward, I was naturally alone at university, but I didn't mind. However, being alone seemed to attract attention, and "We're going out for drinks with everyone. Want to come along? If it's not possible, that's okay, but if you can, definitely join us." That's how Aaron approached me. Later, I heard from Aaron that he had been curious about me. "You were always alone, right? And you were constantly watching me. But you never approached me or anything. That's why I got really curious." That's what Aaron said. No, it's not like I was watching you with the intention of talking to you. I was just watching you because I couldn't approach you. I said that, surprising him. It seemed like Aaron couldn't understand my behavior, but I could understand what Aaron was saying. A lonely woman constantly glancing in his direction. Of course, that would pique his interest. I declined the invitation for drinks, but it became an opportunity for us to start talking and gradually become closer. Aaron had a similar background to mine, but he has siblings. "My older brother will inherit the family business, so I don't really need to study management. Well, it's just a precautionary measure, I guess," he said with a shy smile. I had an even better impression of him as a caring and family-oriented person. Aaron would talk about anything, so I also became comfortable sharing my thoughts. Naturally, I revealed that my family runs a restaurant and that I would eventually have to inherit it, along with my concerns about it. Aaron, having learned about my worries, "I'll help. I'm good at customer service that you struggle with, so I can assist you," he said. "Huh? Really? So does that mean you'll become my husband?" I blurted out those words unintentionally. "Yeah, I intended it as a proposal," Aaron said with a laugh. That became the starting point of our relationship. After we started dating, Aaron helped out at my family's restaurant, as he promised. He had a laid-back side, but his strong communication skills and reliability attracted me, and that's why I decided to marry him. We were happy when our child was born, but that happiness didn't last long. One day, my father suddenly collapsed. "He has about 6 months left." When the doctor informed us of that, my mind went blank. But I didn't have time to grieve. Should I keep the restaurant open without my father, the head chef? "If possible, could you continue operating the restaurant for the sake of the customers? My situation wouldn't matter to those who have made reservations." My father, looking worn out, said that to me, and I was troubled about what to do.
I'll open the restaurant in his place, so Marilyn, stay by your father's side.
With a strong tone, Aaron said those words. My father was surprised.
Is it okay? It'll be a great help. The current chefs are all capable of doing the work. The quality of the food won't decline. Aaron, thank you. I'm counting on you.
My father said repeatedly, bowing his head to Aaron. Suppressing the urge to cry, I also thanked Aaron multiple times. Without any hesitation, we entrusted everything about the restaurant to Aaron. This is the beginning of the incident. We noticed something was amiss about a month later. When I stopped by the restaurant after my father's hospital visit, "Excuse me, may I have a moment?" The employee approached me and said that. The employee is a woman in charge of catering, and she has been working for us for 5 years. You're the person who came in as a substitute for the head chef, and you're acquainted with the owner, right? By any chance, are you aware of the complaints from the other chefs? She said awkwardly. Acting head chef, I had never heard of such a thing. This comes as a surprise. Wait, a substitute? We didn't bring in any substitutes. My father told me that the current chefs can handle everything, even in the absence of the head chef. I said this in surprise. I can't believe it. He's been here for a month already. He was supposed to take over as the head chef, but he hasn't done any work at all. Please verify it with your own eyes. She said that and bowed her head before returning to work. What on earth is going on? My mind was filled with question marks. I don't suspect Aaron, but I can't ignore the voices from the employees. I have to confirm it somehow. The next day, I immediately informed Aaron that I would be going to the hospital and decided to sneak a peek into the kitchen. When I secretly went to observe, I was faced with a sight that was beyond belief.
Hey, you guys, bring me some beers.
I could hear Aaron's voice saying that.
Just make some random snacks.
It seemed like Aaron's friend was saying that. The two of them were using the chefs as their servants and doing whatever they pleased since morning. Drinking alcohol in the kitchen, my father would have been furious if he saw that. Suppressing my surprise and anger, "What are you doing?" I calmly asked, as soon as Aaron saw me.
The hospital. Why?
He panicked and was flustered. I had some errands and stopped by. Who is this person, by the way? And what have you been doing since morning? I asked, and Aaron seemed to resign himself.
My friend lost his job, you see, so I wanted to help him out, and he came to assist for a little while, he explained. Next to Aaron, his friend looked awkward, lowering his head. But to drink alcohol in a place like this? I was speechless and appalled by Aaron and his friend's thoughtless behavior. Their actions were shocking, especially considering the trust I had placed in Aaron. However, causing a scene in the restaurant was out of the question. I sighed and said, "I'll ask for more details later, so take your friend and leave." With those words, I kicked them out of the restaurant. In Aaron's absence, I apologized to the chefs and employees. Then I went to the hospital and explained the situation to my father. What? They're interrupting the preparations and having a drinking party? They're really taking advantage.
He was infuriated, as if he were about to storm in and confront them. "I'm sorry, Dad." I kept apologizing repeatedly, and in response,
"There's no use being angry now. More importantly, Marilyn, are you okay?"
He showed concern for me, having been betrayed by Aaron. His kindness made tears uncontrollably stream down my face. As I discussed the future with my father, our visiting time came to an end. Am I going to talk to Aaron now? I can't forgive him so easily. What should I do? With those thoughts weighing heavily on my mind, I made my way home with a heavy heart.
"Hey, Mom, you're alone?"
My son, who had arrived home earlier, said with surprise. "Yeah, I'm alone, but why are you asking?" I replied.
"Dad left just a while ago. I thought he went to pick you up. I even made dinner for everyone,"
Raoul said with a troubled expression. My son Raul is skilled in cooking and attends culinary school. Whenever he has time, he cooks meals for the family. I'm really hungry already. Why don't we eat together first? I acted cheerfully. Honestly, I felt relieved that Aaron wasn't there because I didn't want to see his face. While having a meal with my son,
Mom, how's Grandpa's condition? Since I have no school tomorrow, can I go to the hospital with you?
My son asked, and we made a promise to go to the hospital together. My son, who adores his grandfather, had been diligently visiting him in the hospital. Talking to my kind son seemed to cleanse my heart. From that day on, I didn't run into Aaron. I was busy taking care of my father and work, and when I returned home, it was already late at night, so I would quickly fall asleep out of exhaustion. On the other hand, Aaron would come home, but I had no idea where he went or what he was doing. I realized that Aaron was avoiding me, but I was too busy to do anything about it. And as months passed without finding time to talk to Aaron, my father passed away. As soon as the funeral was over, I was overwhelmed with deep sadness and became completely worn out. In that state of lethargy, Aaron took the initiative and acted in my place. Despite avoiding each other until now, there were so many things I wanted to say to Aaron, all of a sudden, but I couldn't find the energy to say them.
Mom, I'll help out at the shop. Take some time to relax.
My son spoke up.
That's right, leave the shop to me and Raul.
Aaron also chimed in, but I coldly replied, I'm sorry, but I can't entrust it to you. Aaron chuckled with a smirk and said,
I understand, but isn't it worrisome to rely only on Raul? I won't do the same things as before. I won't go into the kitchen, he said.
Certainly, I couldn't entrust the shop solely to my student son, but I had no choice but to seek help from Aaron, who was still part of our family. So, temporarily, I entrusted the management of the shop to Aaron. Little did I know that this decision would become the biggest mistake of my life. They say people change with money, and Aaron's transformation was evident for all to see. Suddenly, his appearance became flashy, and he started going out for drinks frequently, using business as an excuse. He would come home drunk in the early hours of the morning. When I would reprimand them, he replied,
Shut up! Building connections with fellow professionals is also about attracting more customers. It's absurd for you to complain when I'm doing it for the sake of your shop,
he retorted, getting defensive. But things have been strange lately. Even the clothes you're wearing now, all of them are branded. I pointed out his careless spending.
Listen, you can't represent a long-standing establishment looking shabby. I'm considering the brand image of your shop.
With a sigh that showed his annoyance, Aaron continued.
If you don't pay attention to these things, you'll go under, he said.
Those words left me exasperated. My father managed to run the shop successfully without dressing up like that, I replied. Then Aaron,
Huh? Your father is just a chef. He's a novice when it comes to running a business with cooking as his only skill, he said, belittling my father. Aaron pulled a beer out of the fridge and poured it into a glass. Do you even understand the current situation? I'm working in your place, you know. Instead of complaining, you should be grateful, he said, looking down on me.
Are you serious? I asked.
Just think about it. When you were involved in running the business, you couldn't have this kind of lifestyle, right? I have a better sense of management. I feel sorry for your father, too. He couldn't enjoy himself before he passed away.
Saying that, Aaron laughed and gulped down the beer. Watching him, all the blood drained from my head. I felt a rage so intense that my vision darkened. Sense of management? Cut it out already. I've been handling the bookkeeping for a long time, so I'm well aware of the business situation. Where on earth is all this disposable income coming from? Have you been touching the shop's money? And as soon as I questioned him,
Shut up!
Aaron shouted angrily. At the same time, I became drenched. What are you doing? I screamed, not understanding what had happened. Aaron raised his voice.
Who's responsible for our luxury? If you don't like it, then get out! He
stared at me with a terrifying expression. In shock, I stood frozen in place.
Mom, are you okay?
My son said while running up to me. I finally understood the situation when I saw that Raoul had a towel in his hand. Aaron had poured beer all over me. As beer dripped from my hair and the scent of alcohol filled the air, I couldn't stop the tears of frustration.
Dad, you've gone too far.
My son said to Aaron.
Do you think that's okay? You'll end up leaving too.
Aaron smirked and tried to intimidate even our son. In that moment, as I tried to intervene,
You should be the one to leave,
my son said coldly. I was speechless and surprised at that statement from my normally mild-mannered son. Aaron was also upset by the unexpected turn of events.
I said leave.
And when my son said it again, Aaron's face turned bright red.
You dare tell your own parent to leave? You're no longer my son, someone like you. Get out right now, immediately.
Aaron shouted at our son, grabbing his arm and trying to drag him towards the entrance. However, our son easily shrugged off Aaron's grip and said,
Just stop it already. You're the one who should leave. This is my home, he said.
My husband's eyes widened and he froze in place.
This house and the business are under my name. I received them as a gift from Grandpa while he was still alive.
Upon hearing our son's words, Aaron furrowed his brows.
What is this? What's going on? When did this...
Aaron panicked, and our son calmly began to explain.
While you were avoiding Mom, I discussed with Grandpa what could be done to protect the business and Mom. We came up with this plan to ensure Mom's safety,
my son said. Aaron's face turned pale.
Who do you think made it possible for you to grow this big? You're forgetting the favor I did in raising you.
Aaron spat out his words.
I haven't forgotten. I grew up because Grandpa and Mom worked hard for me. Isn't that right?
My son calmly replied.
What did you do for me, Dad? When it came to tuition fees and career choices, it was Grandpa and Mom who were there for me. You were in no position to tell me to leave.
With relentless words from our son, Aaron hung his head and slumped his shoulders. And with an empty expression, he said,
How is Marilyn going to run the business in such a situation? You're so reliant on me, yet all you do is talk back. If you apologize now, I'll forgive you. Come on, apologize quickly.
He was pressuring us to apologize. Apologize? I was perplexed, but my son intervened.
Mom, you don't need to apologize. It's Dad who should apologize. Mom, stay strong.
His words snapped me out of it. You're right. I'm not in a state where I should apologize anymore. Saying that, I handed over a document.
Huh? What's this?
It's the divorce papers. In reality, after discussing the future with my father, I had gone to retrieve the divorce papers. I couldn't forgive being betrayed. But then my father said,
You can get a divorce anytime. First, think carefully about your own happiness before making a decision.
He advised me, and I had been thinking about it all this time. Finally, I had my answer. Please divorce me. When I said that, Aaron's face contorted and he replied,
No way. You must be joking, right?
He said.
She's not the kind of woman who jokes about something like this. Aaron, you know my mom's personality better than anyone, right?
He looked straight into Aaron's eyes. Aaron's face turned even paler than white at my words. As expected, Aaron threw a tantrum and refused to get a divorce. But I had anticipated this outcome. You spent some of the store's money. Did you know that you are guilty of embezzlement? If you won't agree to divorce, then let's fight to the end. When I conveyed my determination to Aaron, he reluctantly agreed to the divorce. The assets we shared as a couple were minimal. The property inherited by my son from his father was not subject to division, so we were able to protect the shop in our family home. As for Aaron, it seemed that he couldn't change his extravagant lifestyle that he had once adopted. He didn't make a serious effort to find a job, but instead accumulated more and more debt. Eventually, he got involved in dangerous activities and strayed from the right path. I have no idea where he is now, and I can't contact him. I don't really care, but I hope he's living a strong life somewhere. As for me, I have been helped by my son, employees, and customers around me. Thanks to them, I have managed to keep going. It's painful that things I thought wouldn't change have indeed changed, but I've come to understand that change is inevitable. It's through change that people can grow. With that in mind, I'm working hard on improving my weak point, which is customer service. I learned the hard way that relying on others for customer service resulted in a painful experience. I'll use that lesson to guide my future. From now on, I won't run away from things I can't do. I'll face them head on.
Don't talk to me. I'm tired. When I told my husband, who had just returned from work, that dinner was ready, that's what he snapped back with. Seeing me at a loss for words, he sighed. Really, you have it easy. I bet you've never considered what I'm thinking or doing. Being a good husband isn't a walk in the park. My once calm and gentle husband seems to have vanished. His cold gaze pierces me. He knocked back the icy beer I'd set out for him in no time flat, then disappeared into our bedroom. From that moment on, it was as if I didn't exist to him. Every word out of his mouth seemed to cut deeper than the last. Things like, Nicole, since you're working part-time, you should handle all the housework. And you're bringing in money now, so don't expect me to chip in for expenses. Just like that, I found myself saddled with all the housework, and he didn't contribute a single cent to our living costs. Our only means of communication were messages over text, most of which he never even bothered to open. I kept asking myself how we ended up like this, and the answer hit me in a pretty unexpected way. I'm Nicole, a 30-year-old working part-time. I married Dan, my same-age partner, 3 years ago. We were set up by a friend who thought we might hit it off, and they were spot on. We clicked instantly and bonded over our shared love for books and our similar ways of thinking. Dan was such a gentle and kind-hearted guy that I fell head over heels in no time. After several dates, I was the one who suggested we make it official. Dan was on the same page, and we jumped into a relationship full of joy and excitement. We've managed to navigate our way this far without any big blowouts or fights. We've got a pretty fulfilling marriage, except for one big hiccup, and that's Dan's work situation. He's stuck in a textbook exploitative company, working unpaid overtime, getting called in on his days off without a moment's notice. There's a never-ending round of work parties disguised as client entertainment, and Dan always comes home exhausted. Hey Dan, are you sure you're okay with this? How about considering a company where you can actually catch your breath? Well, yeah, but I'm in the middle of a major project. Plus, it seems like my boss is expecting a lot from me. Dan's a good guy, but struggles with making decisions and tends to get swayed easily. He's been mulling over the idea of changing jobs, but for various reasons, he's been unable to take that leap. I couldn't stand by and watch him get increasingly burnt out, though. I talked to friends from college, older acquaintances, anyone who might know of better companies, and I started coming through job postings. I narrowed it down to around 10 companies and suggested that Dan give them a shot. I knew I was meddling, but he seemed grateful for the suggestion. Maybe he needed that little push. Either way, he threw himself into the job hunt, and finally he managed to switch to a company that treated its employees a lot better. The overtime is almost non-existent, they strictly observe the weekend, and he can actually take vacations and paid leave. Dan, who'd been physically and mentally drained, began to regain his vitality and seemed more lively since the job switch. I was beyond relieved that I'd pushed him to change jobs. I truly meant it from the bottom of my heart. Then, about 6 months after Dan made the switch, during a break at my part-time job, I noticed that he had tried to reach me. Wondering what was up, I stepped outside to return his call. Hello? Dan? What's going on? Dan picked up immediately, seeming to be on break too. Sorry for the sudden ask, but can I invite my coworkers over this Sunday? They all are curious to meet you. His request was unexpected, but not unwelcome. I was actually relieved that Dan seemed to be making friends at work. Absolutely! I've got the weekend off. Maybe I'll go out and cook up a storm, I replied, which seemed to cheer Dan up. Thanks. We chatted a bit more before ending the call. Okay, time to figure out the menu. A few days rolled by, and it was finally time to host Dan's coworkers. They all turned out to be senior members of his department. They were pretty decent folks, showing up with gifts and even lending a hand to set the table. Among them, a guy named Howell seemed particularly attentive to me, striking up a conversation. So, Nicole, what do you usually get up to? On my days off, I read, and recently Dan and I have been hitting the shops. Then Howell started throwing all sorts of questions my way. I see. But you also work, right? Do you and Dan split housework? Who manages your finances? Do you have an allowance system? How much do you typically spend on living expenses per month? His interrogation left me a bit startled. Why would he ask such things? Despite being Dan's senior, it felt intrusive. Caught off guard, I tried to laugh it off and looked to Dan for a rescue. Hey, Dan, could you lend me a hand with these empty cans? Dan, all smiles, obliged, and we both slipped away. Once in the kitchen, I expressed my discomfort to Dan about Howell's prying questions. He seemed a bit taken aback, but asked me to bear with it because Howell was a senior he looked up to. That didn't sit right with me, and I was about to voice my objections when Dan, as if deciding the conversation was over, shook his head and went back to entertain his coworkers. I was left feeling frustrated and muttered under my breath out of everyone's earshot. What the heck? That day, unbeknownst to me, was a game changer in our relationship. Fast forward 2 months after we hosted Dan's coworkers, Dan started acting strange. He was more distant, even a bit cold. He just didn't feel like the Dan I knew. He had always been helpful with chores like cooking and cleaning, but recently, he'd completely stopped. Even though he now had more spare time than when he was slogging away at his old job, he didn't lift a finger around the house. Also, he hardly spoke to me anymore, giving curt answers to my attempts at conversation. He'd stopped accompanying me shopping too. After enduring this bizarre behavior for a while, I thought of proposing a vacation during the long holiday the following month. How about hitting the beach for the next long weekend? Remember that gorgeous place featured on TV the other day? I asked as Dan walked in from work. He shot me a quick look, but instead of replying, he just cracked open a beer and started drinking. When he didn't respond, I figured he didn't hear me and gave it another shot. Then out of the blue, he scrunched up his face and snapped. Give it a rest. Don't talk to me. I'm tired. His words knocked the wind out of me, and I was left speechless. Seeing my stunned face, he let out an exasperated sigh, downed his beer in one gulp, and vanished into her bedroom. After that, his already distant demeanor froze over completely. He started to brush me off whenever I tried to strike up a conversation and shot hurtful remarks like, Nicole, you have a part-time job, so you handle the chores. I'm not chipping in for the bill since you're bringing in money. He held true to his words, not shelling out a single cent, leaving me to juggle the chores and bills alone. I was at a loss, unable to fathom why he changed so drastically. Our attempts at discussion fell on deaf ears. Our only mode of communication was through text, which he would often ignore. Fear started creeping in, suggesting Dan might be cheating on me. Could it be that he's head over heels for another woman, leaving me out in the cold? The mere thought was unbearable, and I set out to gather evidence, sneakily checking his phone and his old social media accounts whenever he dozed off. I did find he was frequently calling his workplace senior Howell, whom he admired greatly, but I found no trace of infidelity. The mystery of Dan's chilly behavior left me feeling on edge, and the stress began taking a toll on my health, leading me to spend most of my free days in bed. One day, I woke up on the couch just as Dan was getting home from work. He flung his suit jacket at me, looked down at me with cold eyes, and barked, "Hey, what's for dinner?" I couldn't believe he showed no concern for his ailing wife. Fed up, I hurled his jacket back at him, retorting, "Don't talk to me! I'm tired!" Taken aback, he tried to backtrack. I mean, you didn't whip up dinner, huh? Seeing his discomfort, I stood up, fetched some documents from the cabinet, and shoved them under his nose. "I'm stuck doing all the housework and footing all the bills. You ignore me, show no concern for my health. What's the point of being married? Look at these figures. I've got savings and I make enough to get by on my own." As he stared at the bank documents, a look of confusion crossed his face. "Huh? What are you trying to say?" "I'm saying I want a divorce. You're not into me anymore, right? If that's the case, there's no sense in being married." The truth is, when I started sniffing around for signs of Dan's possible infidelity, I also took up a side gig. If he was really messing around on the side, I was pretty sure we were headed for Splitsville. When I mentioned the D word, Dan looked like he'd been blindsided by a bus. I guess it really knocked him for a loop. He holed up in the bedroom, clutching his head. Not that it was going to change anything. Not long after, I could hear chatter from the bedroom. At first, I thought Dan was just talking to himself, but it turned out he was yakking away on the phone with someone. Maybe getting advice from his mom, who knows? I let him stew and started to pack up my stuff. I figured I'd bunk at my parents' until Dan simmered down. As I packed, I realized I didn't really have a ton of stuff. I mean, I could buy new clothes anytime, and as long as I had my precious stuff, I was golden. Okay, time to hit the road. Just as I was about to blow this popsicle stand, the doorbell rang. Talk about lousy timing. Already at the front door, I opened it with a sigh. And boy, was I floored by what I saw next. There, dressed to kill in a sharp suit and holding a bunch of roses, was Howell. Why in the world was Howell here, and all decked out? While I was gobsmacked, Dan, who was supposed to be on the phone in the bedroom, came barreling out. He started with a smile, but that faded into a look of utter confusion. Oblivious, or just ignoring the awkward situation, Howell gave me a warm smile and said, "Nicole, I've come to sweep you off your feet." Both Dan and I let out an incredulous, "What?" Dan snapped out of it before me and let loose. "Oh, I get it, Nicole. You're sneaking around with Howell, and that's why you're talking about divorce." I was about to set Dan straight on his wildly incorrect accusation, but Howell got there first. "Nicole cheating? No way. I admit, I'm sweet on Nicole. Fell for her the first day we met at this house." Howell continued, getting all nostalgic. "I wanted to go steady with her, but you were cramping my style, Dan. If you two split though, that's another story." Howell shot Dan a loaded look. Something seemed to click for Dan, his voice shaking. Hold on, the advice about skipping housework to look macho or playing stingy with the living expenses so I wouldn't be taken for a ride? Bingo! All that advice was to get Nicole to dump you. I didn't think you'd swallow such dumb advice, hook, line, and sinker. Howell had a good laugh at Dan's expense. I was too gobsmacked to say a word. Howell is single. Sure, he's good at his job and Dan respects him as a senior, but if he had thought things through, he'd have realized that advice was baloney. Dan's wishy-washy, easily swayed nature was really biting him in the butt now. Everything played out just like I planned. You two are divorcing. Thanks, Dan, for the heads up and letting me come to whisk Nicole away. It all clicked into place. Howell showing up now, Dan on the phone with them earlier. No way. Howell couldn't be that ruthless, but he's actually here. Dan seemed to be spinning, cursing Howell one second and bemoaning being duped the next. After going through the motions, Dan finally turned to me. You heard the whole shebang! This guy played me! I'm not the bad guy here, am I? Don't even mention divorce! Let's take it from the top. Dan shot me this weird half-laugh, half-cry look, but my mind was already made up. I don't need a dim-witted husband who'd rather believe some colleague over his wife. Hearing this, Dan, looking crestfallen, busted out laughing as if he'd lost it. Tears welled up in his eyes. Why on earth did he think I'd call off the divorce? Fed up with the drama, I grabbed my stuff to split, but Howell's blocking my way, eyes brimming with tears for reasons I couldn't fathom. I'm over the moon. Nicole, you picked me over Dan. His triumphant laugh was soon replaced with a dead serious face. Nicole, I love you. Please, be mine. Not a chance! Why in the world would I pick you? You're creepy! You started this whole mess! I'll despise you forever! When I spit this out, Howell, Mr. Confidence a second ago, was dumbstruck. Could you please just leave? If I see your face again, I'm calling the cops. Actually, I'm doing it right now. You make my skin crawl. Anger coursing through me, I whipped out my phone. Maybe it was the threat of calling the cops, but Howell's smug attitude changed in a flash, and he whimpered, "Please, anything but that," before hightailing it out of there. A month later, Dan and I were officially over and done. It all went down quicker than expected, thanks to my mother-in-law who persuaded Dan to agree to the divorce after she got the lowdown. Dan finally came to grips with what he'd done and apologized. For a moment there, I thought maybe if he was genuinely sorry, we could try again. But hearing about his shenanigans since then, any such feelings evaporated. Seems like after our split, a buddy introduced Dan to a woman and he drove right in. Another buddy introduced him to another woman and he started seeing her too. I knew he was a pushover, but this was beyond belief. Of course, it came to light that he was two-timing them, and the whole thing exploded in a crowded place. What a sorry spectacle. I made a promise to myself to erase Dan from my life. Since then, I haven't run into Howell, the cause of all this chaos. He must be terrified of being reported. From what I heard, he was so rattled by everything that he started blowing off work and got canned. He's since fallen off the grid. As for me, I decided to cut all ties and move far away. I'm now making more from my work-from-home gig than my part-time job, so moving wasn't a big deal. I found myself living solo for the first time in a while. Thought it'd be lonely, but it's been anything but. I work when I feel like it, eat when I'm hungry, and chill when I want to. Life's never been better. From now on, I'll forget about these losers and live for myself. That's what I was thinking, sipping my post-dinner coffee.